1, 2, 3, 4. Welcome to Crazy Chester. Welcome to Crazy Chester. Crazy Chester's Radio Hour. Welcome to Crazy Chester. Welcome to Crazy Chester. Crazy Chester's Radio Hour. Yeah, Crazy Chester's Radio Hour. Crazy Chester's Radio Hour.
Welcome to the Crazy Chester Radio Hour. I'm your host, Andreas Werner, record producer, songwriter, and composer with a Muscle Shoals soul. And for today's episode, I'm digging up my archives and share with you a conversation I had with my great friend Charlie Feldman 2019 in Cannes at a Midem music conference. And Charlie at that point was vice president of BMI, located in New York, and previously he had worked in publishing in Nashville and came through Muscle Shoals as a songwriter, and that's the Muscle Shoals connection. I didn't publish the interview at that time only for the reason that we only covered the first half of Charlie's life in music, and I wanted to cover his whole life, if you will. But I thought, why not just cover this half, and that may give me a reason to visit with Charlie and talk about the second half at a later date. So here we go with my conversation with the great Charlie Feldman. Welcome to the Crazy Chester Radio Hour, Charlie. Thanks for being my guest today.
I'm honored, and you're fun to be with, and we're in a nice setting.
Yeah, we're here in Cannes at Midem, where we met 3 years ago, I believe.
Thanks to our friend John. Yes.
John introduced us, and you're from Birmingham, Alabama, originally.
Right.
How did you get started in music?
I got into music as a kid because my father was a really good piano player, and he had a baby grand piano, a Steinway Baby Grand 200,000 series, which means it was made in about 1920 or 19, and he was real good, and he played classical, and he played some popular music, and I used to watch him play, and I started learning some of the songs that he was playing. There was a Harry James song called I Had the Craziest Dream, and I ended up learning the song, and he would play stuff for me. He played Franz Liszt, he played Hungarian Rhapsody, and I got into music. And then in the 9th grade, I was always loving music, and I met these guys in school that had a little band called the Church Keys. And I was drawn to that. I was drawn to hanging out with them. I wasn't a great athlete. I did play some sports. I played football and hated it, and I played baseball and hated it, and I tried basketball and hated it, but I just was drawn to music. And I started hanging out with these guys, and eventually I just pushed my way in, and I was kind of the hustler. All these guys had been successful in their lives, but they didn't really have a drive to want to make anything big happen with the music. But we held it together, and we changed the name to the Basement. And by my sophomore year in high school, we decided to make a record at this little studio in Birmingham called Boutwell Recording Studios, which
is still there too.
It's in that old church now, but when we did it, it was in this little room in English Village in Birmingham. And then later Boutwell moved down to the church, and Eddie Hinton was working there for a while. But I was 15, I was the youngest guy in the band. The other guys already had their driver's license. I can remember riding down with the guys in one of the guys' family's cars, and picking up boxes of records that we had made up on the Vaughn LTD label. And we got played on the radio, and we started playing by our junior year. Maybe it was our junior year, and we really started getting a buzz locally doing cover songs. That song was called I Need You, and it was written by a guy named Braxton Van Zant. I never heard anything from him. He was an African-American guy.
How did you find that
I don't
song?
know. I didn't find it. But it was a simple song, and Papa Don Schroeder was doing record hops, and we went and played his record hop. You know, that was a thing going on there. You'd play these record hops, and the DJs from the local radio station would say, "Hey, everybody, we got the Basemen tonight, or we've got the Ramblers, or we've got the," what was that band called? It was actually called the James Gang. And members of the James Gang morphed into the Candymen, and then they morphed into the Atlanta Rhythm Section.
Okay.
So it was just one of those things, and we started getting jobs, and I was kind of like the hustler that booked the jobs and everything, and worked on all the stuff, and I was also the lead singer of the band, and we were playing. By our junior year in high school, we were playing Ole Miss, Mississippi State, University of Alabama, Auburn, Florida State, Georgia Tech, Furman, and I don't think we ever played at Georgia, but we played all over the Southeast. We were doing great.
What would your repertoire look like at that time? What kind of
that's a
song?
good question. We played everything from, when the Beatles hit, we had these plywood platforms made that folded up and would fit in the drummer's station wagon. And we would we would play other music like Stax and the Vanilla Fudge and Maurice Williams and the Zodiac Stay. We played Set Me Free, Why Don't You, Babe? Get Out of My Life, Why Don't You, Babe? And we did the arrangement of the Vanilla Fudge. And what's really funny is today, I'm name dropping, but it's really a fact. I'm very close to Brian and Eddie Holland and Lamont Dozier, and they wrote that song.
Yeah.
And as a kid, we were playing the Vanilla Fudge version. And we played Knock on Wood, Cropper's song, Eddie Floyd and Cropper, and we played In the Midnight Hour, Cropper and Wilson Pickett. We played. Then we kind of got known for doing the Beatles set. We even went out and found these gray sharkskin suits with a felt half collar, like a Nehru collar.
Yeah.
And we went and would put on these Beatle outfits, and we'd have a platform here on the left, a platform on the right, and then a higher platform for the drums. And the bass player and I stood on the floor, and the other musicians were tiered, and we did a whole Beatles set, and we did the harmony, and we did all those great earlier songs like Can't Buy Me Love, and I Saw Her Standing There, and I Want to Hold Your Hand, and She Loves You, Yeah, 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 all those songs with the harmonies. And we were doing that all over the South and having a ball, and we did it through our senior year, and we made good money, and it helped me go to college. And then in college, the band morphed into a band called the Candy Store Prophets, Profits. Prophets, not PH, not Prophets. It was money profits,
Yeah.
not higher learning profits, And we were still playing all over the Southeast, but it was a different band. There were a couple new members. I went to the University of Alabama to college. The other four guys went to Auburn, but it worked out. And we had fun, and we did a lot of stuff then, but I remember the bassman really being the core. We had 6 members in that band, and the new band was, I think, 5 members. Yeah. And I started, nobody else in the band wanted to write songs, But I started banging around on my father's piano and picking up a guitar and strumming it, and started thinking I wanted to write songs. So I started trying to do that in college. And then that's where Steve Smith came in. Steve came in high school. And he was always hanging around and coming to some of the band shows down in Tuscaloosa and stuff like that. And Tim was a year older than we were, and he was playing quarterback on the Shades Valley football team. I guess we were still in high school when he started coming around with us. And he started, I think, wanting to write songs. But there was a guy before that named Kent Donovan. He was a year older. His father owned Donovan Coffee Company in Birmingham. They made Red Diamond coffee. And they were of means, and he was a bright guy. And he went to the University of Virginia for college. But we all became friends, Kent and Tim and Steve and myself, and we would hang out on the weekends and scheme and dream when we were in high school. And then back to college, Steve was around, and then Steve convinced Tim to go up to Muscle Shoals. This is all out of sequence, but I had met Eddie Hinton in high school traveling around in the cover bands. He had a band called the 5 Minutes.
Yeah.
And then I met Johnny Weicker, who had this band, the Rubber Band, and they actually got a record deal with Columbia Records, and they put out Let Love Come Between Us. And Johnny Townsend, who later went on to be the vocalist of the Sanford Townsend Band, what was that hit he had?
Smoke from a Distant
Fire, yeah. But they were in the Southeast traveling around. So I met all these guys, and I'm a people person, and Eddie was a real charismatic guy. And he was cool. He was just cool. I liked him a lot. And then later, our band, the Candy Store Prophets, was playing around, and it was after Muscle Shoals Sound opened up, so it was 1969. Eddie said, "Man, why don't you bring your band up here and we'll cut a few songs on you?" And that's when I met Donnie Fritz. He was in the control room, and Eddie was doing the engineering, and we cut a Dan and Spooner song called "When the Love Light is Shining in Your Eyes, I Can See Love and Love Forever." Anyway, it was a kind of a bubblegum, and we cut that, and then I had written a song called "Cry Baby Cry." But Jamie Grant, who ended up singing on Smith Perkins Smith album, he sang the lead to the song I wrote. I didn't, because it was melodic, and he was really a better singer than I was. But he ended up going to college and then getting his pilot's license and becoming a corporate jet pilot out of Birmingham. I think he flew for Liberty Mutual or one of the big insurance companies that had their own planes. And he's still doing well. Very talented guy, though. But we went up there and tried that, but nothing really happened. You know, Eddie was kind of trying to find something on the side while he was playing. He was doing real good as the session guitar player with Muscle Shoals Sound. And we went back to college and did all that. And then Steve got the bug, and he knew I was doing all this stuff, and he kind of piggybacked on me and convinced me, with one semester of college left, to move up to Muscle Shoals with him and his brother Tim. And we moved up there, and we lived in Roger Hawkins' childhood home on Section Line Road. And we were writing and singing harmony, and at that time it was 1969 into 70, and that's when Crosby, Stills, and Nash proliferated, and that was a big influence. And we wrote a bunch of stuff together. Some things I wrote alone, some things Steve and I wrote. Tim and I never really, I don't remember us really connecting and sitting down and writing a lot together. Tim was more introverted, but really a nice guy. But Steve and I remember we worked on Save Me, a song called Save Me. Wish I'd never come. We started hearing the stories about Twigs Linden.
Yeah.
from the Allman Brothers,
Roadie.
the roadie, and you know he stabbed a man in Buffalo. My father was from Buffalo, so that became part of the story of Save Me. Now I'm in a, you know, I'm stuck here in this whatever I'm stuck in, and save me, don't let me die, save me, save, you know, whatever it was. So we were writing a bunch of songs, and we actually auditioned. We got signed to Muscle Shoals Sound Productions and Publishing, and Ahmet Erdogan was coming to town, and the owners, you know, Jimmy and Roger and David and Barry, they wanted us to audition for Ahmet. So we sang in the control room, and he passed. I don't even remember what we sang, but we sang some songs and harmonized, and he didn't want to sign us because he had the Stones and he had Crosby, Stills and Nash. What did he need with another?
Zeppelin, whatever.
Yeah, in Zeppelin. What he didn't need a replica, you know, somebody trying to almost replicate that in a way. And then I had a girlfriend, and she moved up there with me, and I was kind of mentally confused and feeling like I was losing my grasp up there. So I decided to go back to Birmingham, and then I went back to college and graduated, and that's when Wayne came in. I think I met Wayne up there before it all happened. He was a nice guy.
Yeah, Wayne
Perkins, yeah.
So so you guys wrote the songs and kind of had the template for the band, and you left. It was then when they started the Smith Perkins Smith album?
Yeah, because we were signed as Smith, Feldman and Smith to their production company. And then when I left, they got Wayne in, which was a good thing. And I don't think Wayne wrote anything on that album, but he was so great. And there were four songs, or I think four songs that I was involved in, but really two of the four I was really involved in, and that was The Man He Was. I wrote the words, and then Steve heard it, read it, and went to the piano and figured out how to make it work with the piano. And that song, Save Me, which Steve and I were sitting with our guitars, and we really were playing through it, and I don't remember how much contribution was, maybe more was his, I don't know. And then in the aftermath, Tim, that was really his song. And we're talking about an album that's very obscure that nobody really knows about, but it was the first time I ever had songs cut.
Yeah, and I loved the album, and I had David Hood on my podcast, and I wanted to ask him some about his production work, and we talked about that record quite a bit, and he was proud of the record, although I guess it had a little heartache too for them to find a way to finish it and eventually release it too.
See, I don't know that part of their story about that, but I do know that Chris Blackwell, I guess Traffic, there was a connection with Traffic, and I think that may have come around the time of this album when Roger and Barry and David were out working with Traffic. And Chris Blackwell came down there, and I think the guys played him some of the recordings they had been working on. And he liked it, and he signed it to Island Records. And he took the album. I don't know what kind of marketing was done on it. I don't remember anything really happening. But I was kind of in a hurtful period where I just kind of blocked it out. So I don't know what really happened there. But I do know they went to England to tour and play. And it seemed very suddenly that they just couldn't hook it. They just fell apart. And Wayne and Tim came back. And there were some other guys too that were support guys. I don't know who they were. But Steve is the one that really parlayed it into something. And he was industrious because in Muscle Shoals, he figured out how to get a foothold where he could go in and learn and work the board and help 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 people make some music and get it recorded. And I have a picture in my files somewhere that was looking over the Flickinger board in Muscle Shoals at Jackson Highway. Steve is at the board and Leon Russell is standing, or vice versa. Leon is sitting and Steve is standing over him, but they were working on something together. I met Leon Russell with Steve and Tim. Terry Woodford was running the publishing company, and one night afternoon after he had been tracking and it was closed, and we didn't get to go around there, but he came out to a car and says, "Hey guys, ride with me over to the Holiday Inn. I'm taking Leon back to the motel." And in gets Claudia Linear, who at that time was a goddess.
Yeah, they
And
wrote
Leon-
Brown Sugar about her.
Yeah, and Leon gets in the shotgun seat. We're all in the back seat. We're kids. I'm 19 or 20. And Claudia Linear's right there, and Leon is there. And he puts his arm around her, and he was a charismatic guy. And I'm thinking, this is the coolest white man I've ever been around.
Yeah.
It had a big impact. And we rode with them. You know, I didn't open my mouth, you know. We didn't engage in a conversation. Leon wasn't a very talkative guy, I don't think. But Terry drove him over to the motel and dropped him off, and we were in the back seat.
Yeah.
One of those experiences. I didn't meet Joe Cocker, but he was cutting stuff for Mad Dogs and Englishmen. And back to Steve. Steve figured out, he was charismatic, and he figured out how to get in there and you know, make stuff happen for himself. And so when Chris signed the band and they didn't make it, he stayed in London. And it's really funny. There was some experience. I don't know if I'm talking too much about things that are
That's
disjointed.
good. That's
but
what this podcast is about.
so, you know, I'm thinking about other things that occurred in Muscle Shoals while we were there. Johnny Weicker, who was a real character, he was like, at that time, like a James Dean cat. You know, he wore the aviator sunglasses. He was thin. He had good hair. He looked good, and he was zany, but he was creative. And I remember he was married to this wealthy daughter of a wealthy guy. They lived in a great house, and Steve and Tim and I would go over there, and we ended up helping him vocally with "On the Brighter Side of It All," which I think ended up in the Sailcat album.
Sailcat album.
And we didn't get any writer credit, but I think the magic was happening because we were there hanging out, and this woman, Becky, who was married to Johnny, was beautiful. And the hostess, but very mellow, but just a beautiful. She kind of looked like a young Cheryl Ladd, the actress Cheryl Ladd. That's how I remember her. She was lovely, very pretty and nice. And we had some musical moments there, you know. And Johnny he said, "Man, check this one out. Oh, how I love you, my baby Ruth.
Yeah, we still play
Never
that song
lied
with our
to
band
you.
too.
I always tell the truth." And he would be playing that stuff, and he could play it pretty good, you know. And I think we were maybe harmonizing and singing along with him and stuff. And that, I think, is where his concept of Sailcat came along. Court Pickett wasn't there. I don't know where he was. I don't remember him being there. It was just Johnny, Becky, the three of us. Maybe some other people were there, but I don't remember that.
Yeah.
But there were some nice moments there. And then, you know, I can remember some moments with Eddie down there. And you know, Eddie was really nice to me. And after I left, I got out of the business. I was afraid of it because it had hurt. It was hurtful. I'd lost my grip, and I ended up going back to college, like I said, and then I got a job selling infants and children's clothing to mom and pop stores out in the Midwest. My older brother, worked for this manufacturing company that moved from Minnesota down to Birmingham, called Simon and McGillner, and they made all kinds of infants and children's clothes, and they were vibrant. They were doing big business. So I got a job as a sales trainee, and I went to Chicago, and I was traveling through the Midwest, and then came back. And my brother had back problems. He was traveling in Georgia, and living in Atlanta with he had a wife and some kids. He since divorced her, and he's been married twice since then and had 3 additional kids. But that's another story. But I took over his territory and was making, I mean, this was 1971. I was making $20,000. Look it up in inflation calculator. I didn't know how much money it was, but I was a kid. That's probably in today's money about $100,000, maybe less, maybe 80,000. But I was a kid as a sales trainee making some good money. But 6 months in, I had the hunger. I wanted to get back into music, so I called my parents, and they were very nice about it, but I'm sure when they got off the phone, they said, we got a real problem with this guy. This kid is not doing well. But I quit. And I know it sounds like I'm making up a story, but I rode a Greyhound bus to Nashville. And I had my mother's first cousin lived in Nashville, and they traveled a lot. And they were going to be gone for a month, and they said I could stay in their house with their sons, who were my age. And I stayed in their house, and I was obsessed with writing songs, and I was writing all the time. And then they came back and they said, you got to move out. And I said, okay, I'll move out. And I think I got a motorcycle, a Honda 350, and was struggling. Living in a room in a house, in a nice house over in a nice area of Nashville. But the reason why I'm telling this story is because I was working at this pizza parlor, and I guess I was waiting tables, and the guy that owned it was making the pizzas. It was a mom and pop place. And Eddie Hinton was driving up from Nashville in a Lincoln Mark IV. Big boat of a car, with the big grill, the grill on the front. And he'd come to the pizza place, and I'd work till like 11:30 at night, and it would close. And then he'd say, come on, get in, and we'd go riding around and we'd talk. And I don't know why he did that, but he was very kind. And he knew I was struggling. He knew I didn't have jack, and I didn't ask him for anything, and he didn't say here's some money, but he just spent time with me, and I don't even remember what we talked about, but we rode around and everything. And then time went by, and then I don't remember how long. I had a few other jobs, but I ended up getting a job as a tape copy guy at Screen Gems Columbia Music, and this wonderful man who we just lost this past year. As a matter of fact, Chip Taylor, we were talking about him earlier, he wanted to go to the funeral because he loved this guy, Paul Tannen. And Janice and I, my wife, drove Chip up to Connecticut to the funeral. But Paul Tannen hired me as a tape copy guy. And before that, I was running around Nashville peddling my songs, and I heard there was a guy down there that had Paul Simon's catalog, and that was Paul Tannen. His younger brother managed Paul Simon. And I went and took him some songs, and what really helped me was I was still struggling. I backtracked a little bit. Somebody called me, and I forget who called me. He said, Charlie, have you know that you've got, your name is on the back of this single that's sold to me in copies, and it's 18 with a bullet on Billboard's charts. I said, what are you talking about? And the A-side was Mel Tim, Starting All Over Again, produced by, I think, Barry and Roger. Yeah. I think they're the two that produced
Prince Philip Mitchell wrote that song.
Prince Philip, who I talk to a lot. He's in Kentucky. He's still around. He wrote Starting All Over Again, which Hall & Oates later had a hit with again.
Yeah.
And I ran down to this record store back then. Thank God we had those. I miss them, but I ran down there and I looked in the singles aisles, Stax, and there it was on Stax Records, Mel Tim, Starting All Over Again. I flipped it over, and the B-side was a song called It Hurts to Want It So Bad, which really Tim wrote, Tim Smith. I don't think Steve contributed anything. I know I really didn't, but all three of us got writer's credit.
Okay.
We might have helped him craft it.
So that was just part of the Muscle Shoals sound catalog, and I guess that's how he ended up on there.
Yeah, and I think I told you earlier today, I mean, my first check in 1972 helped me stay in Nashville. I mean, it was like $3,000 as a co-writer of a mechanical that was 2 cents, a penny for the writer side and a penny for the publisher side. And in 1972, $3,000, I think I didn't look it up, but I think it's probably like $20,000 now, or $25,000. That was my first check. And I'm running around in the rain on a Honda 350. That saved my butt. And I'm trying to figure out how I pieced it. That helped me in Nashville when I was going around playing my songs. I could say, even though it's kind of cheesy because I didn't really contribute that much to the song, but I got credit. And this guy Paul Tannen liked my songs, and he didn't sign me to a publishing deal, but he wanted to publish the songs. And then he said, I want to go in and produce you, and I'm going to do it with Fred Carter Jr.,
guitar player,
who played on the Bridge Over Troubled Water album.
He did, and he did some stuff with Levon Helm later too.
And his daughter is Dina Carter, who wrote I Shaved My Legs for This. She had a hit with that. And so he had a studio up in Hendersonville. And we went up there, and they hired this great drummer, Carl Himmel, some of the Memphis guys. And they played on it. And it was bubblegum. And it was real poppy. And it came out. And one of the songs was called You've Been a Long Time Coming My Way. That was a B-side, and the A-side was called Ready, Willin' and Aching. And it was just real bubblegum. And it was sort of influenced by Cherry Cherry of Neil Diamond. Remember that progression?
Yeah.
That guitar driving progression of she got the way to move me, Cherry. It kind of had that up thing. But nothing as good as that. And then later, Tannen got hired to open up the Nashville office of Columbia Pictures Publishing Company, which the nugget catalog of that company was Don Kirshner's stable of writers: Carole King, Jerry Goffin, Barry Mann, Cynthia Wilde, Jack Keller, Howie Greenfield, and Neil Sedaka, the 7 core writers. Mm-hmm. And I jumped at the chance. I was working as a sous chef at a place called Papa Leone's on Abbott Martin Road. This is a while after Eddie was coming up. Then I think what happened, Eddie got obsessed with producing this album with a guy that later became a doctor.
Jim Coleman.
And that project resulted in Eddie becoming schizophrenic. I'm convinced that experience, he was already having problems, and it may have been drug induced, but he was obsessed. I mean, he flew to London and put the big, London strings on that record, and nobody wanted to. Maybe you know that story. I don't know.
Yeah, I've heard the story, and a lot of people told me it pretty much broke his heart.
It broke his heart.
And broke him.
It broke him. But there was something going on that was a catalyst for him to get to that point where he became so obsessed that he couldn't stay in reality and realize, hey, you take your lumps and you move forward. And so cutting out of me working at Screen Gems, I started there in 1974, February. And I'm making a weekly salary and I'm paying my rent, and now I get a used car, a Chevelle or something. And life is getting better, but it's still a struggle, but I'm feeling better. And this guy, Paul Tannen, was an angel sent from heaven as a mentor to me. I learned so much from him. asked Jimmy Johnson about him. I think Jimmy really liked him, and he liked his brother Michael too. But Paul really treated me like a younger brother, and then I got promoted to become a song plugger because I started on my own, going and pitching the catalog. I had songs in there too. They signed me as a writer, but these other writers, Barry Mann, Cynthia Weil, Carole King, Jerry Goffin, Barry Goldberg. We were talking about Atlantic Crossing in the other night. Who was I talking to? Oh, I had dinner last night with a guy who was a manager working for Billy Gaff, who managed Rod Stewart. And he went out and took Rod out on the road as the road manager. His name is John Fogerty, who is now an excellent music publisher. He has publishing on Uptown Funk.
Okay.
He has a piece of the publishing of that. And he's got other big hits, but he was talking about Atlantic Crossing in 1975. And I had just started at Screen Gems in 74, but Barry Goldberg and Jerry Goffin wrote 2 songs on that record. Tom Dow. I drove down to Muscle Shoals on a beautiful sunny day and walked into the screen door on the side of the control room, and I walk in and I'm standing there and I see Tom Dowd at the board, and I don't know if Jimmy was with him or Steve Melton or who it was. There was somebody else. Maybe it was Jerry Masters. I think it was one of those guys, or both of them were there, and Tom Dowd's there, and I look out in the control room. Rod is in the vocal booth. Steve Cropper's on guitar, and David and Barry and Jimmy and Roger. And I don't know who else, but Cropper was in there. And Cropper, we're good buddies now, but back then I thought I was looking at a god, But the point I want to get to that's really important is I'm now a publisher and I'm making more money, and I'm not getting rich. I'm still, I'm 26 years old or 25, however old I am, but I'm kind of getting in and I'm getting songs cut, and I'm meeting producers in Nashville, Alan Reynolds and Brent Mayer and Kyle Linning and these great record producers. I mean, Brent Mayer is as great as they come, man. I mean, he used to run a studio in Las Vegas and work with B.B. King and all these. Ike and Tina. And now he's over at Creative Workshop, and he's got ears of gold. I mean, I love this guy. And I'm starting to nurture these relationships. And Eddie Hinton is now, the first thing I remember about Eddie in his terrible state was he was in Nashville and he looked fairly unkempt, and he had a big sheepdog. And it must have been a dog that he and his wife Sandra had, and somehow he's now got the dog. I don't know what the deal is. I don't know where he's living. But progressively, he became a black man. And he referred to me after I got my job, after a year or two, and I'm growing in this job. He is on the street, and he's scary. Because he could be gentle at one moment, and then the next one he goes, ah! And do crazy stuff and make you feel like he could physically harm you. And he was calling me Massa Feldman. It's hard to reconcile what happened to him. It breaks my heart, but he was acting like he was an old black man that was subservient to the white man. But then later, when they were able to harness his power and do these albums, and you hear him sing, he's a black man singing, but he's not a black man.
Yeah.
Is this old news? Or?
No, it's interesting to hear that from you too, and because different people kind of experienced him kind of similarly, but they all have like their own theory in a way, kind of, what happened though.
He was so destructive mentally and behaviorally that I was concerned. I wanted to help him, but I was afraid to be around him. It was a bad time. This was like, it had to be 74, 73, 4. And at the same time, I told you earlier at lunch, Steve Smith calls me and he says, "Hey, I'm coming through Nashville on the way to." I think he was coming back from New Orleans. He had worked with Billy Payne and those guys, Lowell George's band.
Yeah, Little Feat.
Little Feat, and I think some of them were down in New Orleans. And earlier I said it the other way, but I think he was headed back with Phil Brown, his engineer, through Nashville, and he wanted to come see me. So one night after hours, after everybody was there, we probably had dinner, and we went back to my office, and he had these reel-to-reel quarter-inch mixes, rough mixes of Robert Palmer, Sneakin' Sally Through the Alley album. And we listened to it, and it sounded pretty damn good, but it was rough, you know. But it was all around the same time in my development, in our development. And now I'm a publisher with Screen Gems. Steve is working for Chris Blackwell and really kicking ass. I think he did a live recording with Bob Marley of No Woman, No Cry. Is that right? Do you recollect that?
I believe so.
Yeah. He produced something on Marley, and I think it was No Woman, No Cry live.
And then Wayne Perkins was part of a little bit of that too, I believe.
Well, Wayne stayed over there. That's right, because the Rolling Stones were interviewing him and putting him through some changes, and he's playing on the music so he's credited on Black and Blue, their album Black and Blue. But I guess he didn't cut the mustard for them, or maybe they freaked him out, because I heard it could be.
I heard he wasn't British enough.
but it was head games. I mean, they were, Keith is a sweet guy when I've been around. I was around him one night and he was beautiful, but I never met Jagger.
Yeah, and you had some other cuts too. I guess, did Arthur Alexander cut the Mel Tim?
He cut that same song, It Hurts to Want It So Bad, and so did Van Morrison.
Oh, really? I need to check that out.
It's out. I think what happened is at one time Van Morrison was having some head issues, and he did this album, and then he wouldn't let it out, and then later it got out, and it wasn't a big album, but it sounds to me like his version is a very rough mix, but it's amazing. Because nobody can sing like Van Morrison sings.
And did Sea Level do that song too?
Sea Level did the song in 1975, and it came out on Capricorn as a single. And then I actually got a Percy Sledge cut later on. David Johnson did an album on Percy Sledge, and he cut a song that I wrote by myself called Do Me Baby.
Yeah.
Do me, baby, do me good. Do me like nobody else could. Do me, baby, do me good.
And then Wilson Pickett, he ended up recording more of your stuff, but he did an earlier.
In 1978, Rick Hall was producing him for Big Tree Records, which was Doug Morris's label through Atlantic. And I had just demoed this song thanks to Thomas Kane, because he really brought it alive. He did 3 songs, and one of them was called The Night We Called It a Day, which I came up with all the words, and John Grazier came up with the progression, and we were sitting there, and I started singing this melody, and it became The Night We Called It a Day. And I didn't know this, but I found out later that there was an early jazz standard called Night We Called It a Day, but I'd never heard it. And I don't think it was a big hit in jazz, but, I can still say, and that song, Wolf Stevenson and those guys at Malaco cut it. Yeah, on a guy named James Bradley. Yeah. And then later, may she rest in peace, Denise LaSalle cut it.
Okay.
She just died recently, I think.
Yeah, in the past year. And then Ben Atkins did one of your songs too in Muscle Shoals.
I don't know which song.
Big Ben Atkins. I need to look it up.
Yeah, I'm not sure what
it was like on a 45 too. It might have been a B-side.
I tell people my writing career is really, it's called living on the B-side of life.
It's called Brighter Side of It All.
Well, that's the one Weicker. Did they give us writing credit on that?
They did give you.
They did not?
Yeah, you were credit on it. C. Feldman.
Who else? Is it Johnny Weicker?
Let me see.
Because that's the one I was saying earlier where Steve and Tim and I were sitting around in Johnny's house.
It's credited to you, Weicker, Smith and Smith.
Yeah, see, we were sitting around on the brighter side of it all. I don't remember the whole thing, but...
And that was my conversation with my friend Charlie Feldman. Now, since we conducted our conversation, Charlie has retired from his position at BMI, but he's been writing songs and creating beautiful paintings in his Newgate time. And I'm so glad that he's still creatively active, and I hope I can see him before too long and we can talk about the last 40 years. So anyway, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Charlie, and I hope you keep tuning in. You can also check out some of my previous episodes with people we mentioned in this podcast and some other great folks from Muscle Shoals. And while you do that, please like and subscribe to the Crazy Chester Radio Hour wherever you listen to podcasts. That's it for today. I wish you a great week, and I hope to catch you next time. Bye for now. The Crazy Chester Radio Hour was created and produced by me, Andreas Werner, producer, songwriter, composer with a Muscle Shoals heart. The theme song is performed by Jimmy Hall of Wet Willie and the Funky Chester Rhythm Section. It was recorded at Creative Workshop Studio in Nashville, Tennessee. You can find out more about the podcast and myself at crazychesterrecords.com or on Instagram at crazychesterrecords.